Alright, so I'm no-tilling this small strip on the edge of this brassica plot into, this hopper is corn and this one is beans. A little bit of a mix here just for a little bit of screening. And when the deer come out at last light, maybe they'll feel a little bit more comfortable in the plot during daylight. And right here behind me here is our big 1 acre corn and soybean plot, and then down that way is primarily all corn. I'll be putting this side, all this other rye into brassicas eventually, but I'm gonna be planting the buckwheat into it today, crushing it all down. You can see right here we have a ton of weeds. It's gonna be hard to get a good kill on this water hemp and pigweed right here, but anyways, I tried this in a small plot over that way earlier last week, and it worked really good, surprisingly. This is just a normal 2-row planter, not a no-till planter, just a normal old 2-row planter, and it's got enough weight to push through this pretty soft ground of ours. Plus we had a lot of rain. You can see the soybeans right in there, and it's doing a pretty good job of, you know, covering up the slit in the ground. You can't even see any seeds exposed right where I just ran through with the row. You can see right here's a corn seed. That's probably not going to germinate, but now it will. You can actually see some old brassica bulbs in here from last year. And this side is the corn. This is the last pass I'm going to do. So just like 5 to 7 yards wide of corn and soybeans, and this will all be brassicas. You can see all this, you know, cover crop of winter rye. Right there's the corn seed. And right here's the row. You can see another seed right there, 2 of them actually. And those were covered up with dirt a little bit before I pushed them around. But you can see this row, again, is covered up really nicely. Hardly any seeds or no seeds exposed, really. So this should all germinate. I'm gonna broadcast the buckwheat onto that side. Like I said, right here is not that much rye. A lot of weeds here, so there'll probably be a lot of weeds even after I spray. The buckwheat might not come in that good here, but I'm gonna cultipack all this down along with the stuff right here. I'll pack it all down nice and probably end up spraying it next week because there's some moisture on all these weeds and rye. Plus we're supposed to be getting rain today, this afternoon, so I probably won't get the best kill, especially where all these weeds are. I'm just gonna wait till next week when it's like 90 degrees to spray this. I'll crush it all down today though. I might not get that much footage of it, but I might. I don't know, we'll see. I don't wanna make this a 30-minute video. All right, so before I start seeding this no-till brassica plot, I forgot to mention, I will be doing another buckwheat plot in this same video, but that's gonna be a tilled plot. I'm gonna try and get that one in today too before the rain. That's just over that way on the other side of this darker field right here. So that way you'll be able to really compare the no-till buckwheat into the standing rye on a no-till planting versus tilled buckwheat. I'm pretty sure the tilled buckwheat is going to probably come up faster and be taller, you know, by the time I want to plant the brassicas. And then, you know, we'll be able to see what area grows better for brassicas too. The no-till brassicas into a no-till system for 2 years with the rye and with all the thatch on the ground from last year versus a freshly tilled plot. And right now there's a ton of little tiny water hemp weeds coming up in that plot, so I'm gonna disc that up. The last time it was disked was like 2-3 weeks ago when we planted that field into soybeans. So that field's already got a bunch of stuff coming up. This field should be pretty weed free up here in this taller rye. Down there, like I said, there was some pretty weedy spots, but I'm gonna get seed in here. This is probably about 1/4 acre brassica plot. The other one's about the same, 1/4 acre. All right, so as you just saw, there was a ton of weeds. This spot really needed to be disked down before I planted. And I put them in pretty thick. I'm gonna disc it back in. I'm probably gonna put some of the seed a little bit too deep, but pretty much everything will be covered. I probably wouldn't have to disc it in if we had more rain in the forecast, but this past week we've had a ton of rain, and there's a small chance today and a small chance tomorrow, and then next week's like all like upper 80s, 90 degrees and sun. So if I leave these seeds right on top without any rain, they're gonna be sitting a long time before they germinate, and the weeds will just pop back up like crazy too. So I want to get them in the ground, get the buckwheat growing, hopefully ahead of the weeds. And when I come in here in July or early August to seed the brassicas, hopefully there's not a ton of weeds, but if there is, you know, I'm gonna crush down the buckwheat and the weeds and spray it all. So usually when the weeds are, you know, waist to chest high, they crush down better and they kind of snap off at the bottom, and you get a little glyphosate in there and it'll kill them. But when the weeds are smaller, they're actually, you know, like knee high, they're actually harder to kill by just crushing them. So, well, right behind me here is the buckwheat. It's been probably like 4 or 5 weeks now. It's coming in pretty nice and thick, along with a bunch of weeds. You can see all this lamb's quarters coming in. There was a whole bunch of weeds, you know, as you saw the day I planted, disked them all down and threw the buckwheat seed in. Since I'm just doing no-till brassicas here later in the year, these weeds will probably be like knee high, and the buckwheat will probably be like waist to almost chest high. I'll probably seed into this stuff when it's about waist high, and I'll just crush everything down. I might not get the best kill on these weeds. If these weeds were like chest to head high, I would get a better kill, because just packing everything down would snap these weeds off right at the stem, and them getting sprayed right at the stem, when it's snapped open like that, you get a lot better kill. But with these weeds only going to be probably maybe waist high, there's kind of fold over. But yeah, we'll see how it turns out. I'm expecting some weeds in this Brassica planting, because there's no way the spray is going to be able to kill all this. The buckwheat will die easy, but not these weeds. I'll take you over to the no-till buckwheat plot in just a sec. Oh, there's actually a deer out there. A deer and a turkey. Anyways, I'm gonna head over to the other to the no-till buckwheat plot. You can see the deer are browsing on this buckwheat a little bit in here. They normally don't really browse on it too hard, but it's surprising considering there's beans in that field and beans right here, and a lot of water hemp in here, which they like to eat too. But yeah, normally you don't see deer eating on buckwheat too much, but if they do eat it, it's usually when it's just little like this. But well, here we are at the no-till plot now. You can see these rows of corn and soybeans here on this edge. Put in like 4 rows of corn and like 4 rows of beans, mainly for corn as screening. And here's all the buckwheat and weeds. So all this bigger stuff here, there's a lot of water hemp. There was a big patch of it right here as I was seeding into it. So these plants are bigger. These things will be like waist to almost chest high when I seed the brassicas in. And when I crush these down with the cultipacker, they'll all snap right off at the stem, and I'll be able to get a pretty good kill, maybe on like 75% of these. Unlike those small weeds in the other field, those will only be like maybe knee high when I seed brassicas into. And here's all the buckwheat. This buckwheat probably looks a little bit smaller because it, you know, it's no-till. Got a little bit slower start. The other area I disked in. And then right up here, there's tons of weeds too. These weeds will be definitely harder weeds to kill than these weeds, because these weeds will be bigger, they'll snap right off, and the glyphosate will get right in the stem when I spray this and kill them. But all these weeds in here, I might have issues killing when I crush them and spray them. So I'm kind of, that was a patch of weeds there last year, and there's going to be a lot of weeds there this year if I till them up, there's going to be lots of weeds coming too. But up here, definitely less weeds. The buckwheat actually looks a little dry. I mean, this is definitely a little bit different type of soil here, but less weeds here, more buckwheat. So this will be probably more weed free when I seed the brassicas into it. You can see right here is a patch. Everything's really dried up there. And it's better here, probably just because it's closer to this tree. This rye method is okay, but I don't think it's nearly as good as what people think, because it literally draws so much moisture out of the ground, this rye. And I've heard it sucks a lot of nitrogen out of the ground too. And it's just, this ground is pretty hard, compacted. The other ground, you know, was just soybeans last year. I just disked it down like 2-3 times before I seeded the buckwheat into it. And that buckwheat looks a lot better. Granted, it probably is a little bit darker, a little bit lower, a little bit more moisture in that ground, but than what there is here. But if I were just to till this up, this buckwheat would look bigger than what it is. This rye just sucks so much moisture out of the ground. Although this corn over here looks all right. On this edge, it definitely looks smaller and a little bit more dry too. Let me turn around. There's too much sun glare here. All right, you can see these soybeans are looking pretty good. Surprisingly, they haven't been browsed by the deer too much. And then here's the good look at the corn. Corn and the beans look actually better than the brassicas, better than the buckwheat does. I did spray this pretty heavily, and there is still quite a few weeds in here, but the corn is up and above the weeds a pretty good amount, so it should get pretty tall and produce something. It doesn't really matter if this corn produces anything, because I got all this better corn right here. This is the 1 acre field, and I got a lot of corn down there. This corn right here is mainly just for screening and just to try something new. No-till drilling through this rye. But this ground here, it's really compacted, really hard. If I stick my finger in the soil here, I'm not hitting any moisture at all. And then this area over here was plowed, disked up, and cultivated twice. Just full-on tillage. Nice loose ground, and there's moisture right there, like probably like 4 or 5 inches down. I can't really go that far down in there. I'm sure there is moisture 4 or 5 inches down in there too, but this loose ground just really helps heat up the soil with, you know, with the sun, because it's not no-till, and it just really helps these plants take off faster. Obviously this is not planted the same day as that, so it's not really a good comparison, but I don't know. I thought this rye would have suppressed the weeds a little better than what it's doing, because there's just millions of seeds of water hemp, Roundup resistant weeds in here. I think I'm almost better off just next year. I got a really bad patch of water hemp in this no-till plot right here. So this area is all getting plowed up next year. I'm going to do probably corn and cultivate it all. Spray it once, cultivate everything in between the rows so the spray doesn't kill, and just get a nice weed-free stand of corn here. And then maybe switch it back to no-till or something the year after that. But I'm really starting to lean towards cultivating a lot of my corn, pretty much all my corn. And in the weedy spots, I'm going to plant soybeans on 38-inch rows and start to cultivate a lot of my beans as well. So, well, back out to the buckwheat plots. I'll be seeding these plots today. I'm just getting ready to seed this. And you'll see the Brassica Planting videos whenever they come out, probably all the way in September, because it usually takes about a month for them to get about a couple inches tall, and then they really take off that second month. So I just wanted to do a buckwheat video this year to just show the different, this was the tilled buckwheat section next to the almost 1 acre of beans right here. And then the other plot, which I'll take you to next before the video's over, that was the no-till buckwheat into the standing rye. And that one's got some weeds in it, but I can't believe how good this buckwheat looks. There was a lot of weeds in this buckwheat And there still is right here, all this lamb's quarters. So when I seed into this and crush it down, there might be some weeds that survive the spraying, because there is some bigger weeds in there. And the deer are actually nipping on this stuff a little bit, which is kind of surprising. Normally they leave it alone. But anyways, this buckwheat, it like outcompeted the weeds. I couldn't believe, like when I first, you saw when I planted this area, it was just full of weeds. And after everything started to germinate, I thought it was going to be almost a total loss because the weeds were just as thick as the buckwheat. And this buckwheat, man, this stuff grows so fast. It outcompeted weeds, so that's pretty amazing. And now it looks really good. It's way up and above the weeds down in here. So the other plot doesn't look quite as big. I'll bring you over there next. Well, here we are. This is the no-till buckwheat plot. You can see it's a substantial difference. Right up here, it's probably a combination of shade and being too close to these trees, sucking up all the moisture. But out here in the middle, it looks a little better. Not quite as tall as the other field was. And then you see we got some weeds in here. Those aren't gonna die. And then we got over here where it's actually partial shade. It's actually pretty tall in some of those areas down there by the swamp, but right underneath this big black walnut right here, man, this stuff looks pretty dry, pretty short, probably because all these trees are sucking up all the water. So there ain't going to be a whole lot covering these brassica seeds, that's for sure. But look at the difference here. Look at how big that is right there, and look at how short it is right here. That's pretty amazing, the difference. And now right here, this is as tall as the other plot was. So way down here, these will probably be some of the best looking brassicas and most moisture right here. So yeah, I'm gonna get seeding. Hopefully we do get at least a ½ inch of rain. Otherwise, these seeds are gonna be sitting here for a while before they germinate. And that usually doesn't turn out that good. So yeah, I'm gonna get seeding. Well, thanks for watching this buckwheat video. You'll see like I said, you'll see the brassica videos, the extended footage of this. I'll be planting this in a couple minutes here. You'll see these videos probably coming out sometime in September. All right, so back out here tonight. I wasn't planning on doing another update, but this is one of the buckwheat plots right here. It's Tuesday night. Saturday I planted the buckwheat, and that was the last time you saw these plots. But on the last soybean video, I had a lot of people comment like, oh, you should be using no-till. Tilling is just gonna bring up a ton of weeds. No-till rye is the way to go. I thought that was the way to go too, as of just this spring when I planted this section. And here's the proof. So right on the other side of this corn is the buckwheat area that I crushed down. I think I forgot to add an update of this corn and beans of this plot. That's why I'm back out here. And look at what we got here. This is the straight no-till. This area has been no-till for probably 3 or 4 years, right where I'm standing. And every year I've been getting more and more weeds here. Now the corn looks all right, okay? The corn, I think I should be able to do no-till into, because it gets ahead of the weeds after the first spraying, and now it looks really healthy. But if I were to do beans into this no-till, it's never ever gonna work. I mean, look at what the weeds got here. Look at how thick these weeds are. Just 100% water hemp, and this was 5 foot tall rye without any weeds in it whatsoever when I drilled all this stuff into it. I mean, the beans look nice and healthy. I didn't even fertilize them, so there's no nutrients deficiency. And like I said, the ground here hasn't been tilled for a couple years. Right in here, I tilled certain sections of this brassica because even when I crushed it over, it was just straight weeds, like about this size, that the Roundup wasn't going to kill. So there's no way I'm going to be able to grow brassicas, throwing brassica seeds straight into green Roundup resistant weeds. So that's why I had to till certain sections in here. Like right there, the buckwheat was good. There was less weeds. I left that alone. But a lot of this I tilled, so I don't know how good it's going to come up anyways, because I seeded first and then crushed. So a lot of these seeds might be too deep, but we'll see what comes up. But as you can tell here, the corn looks good. But if this was all beans, it would be like just a total failure. Like, look at all these weeds in here. And I sprayed this once, literally just like 2 or 3 weeks after I planted it, because there was a whole flush of weeds coming up. And I was able to kill maybe half of them. But so I may do a little bit more of this in some of my plots next year. But I really think if I can't, without getting like an enlist soybean or a dicamba soybean, like something that a farmer could come in here and spray, but my plots are so small they'll never even be able to get in here anyways. I think cultivating on 38-inch rows is the only way I can have 100% weed control and the highest yield. And my cultivated corn looks just as big as this. Obviously that area was planted probably a week or two prior, but it's just as tall, if not taller. So no-till has its time and place, but not always, because, I mean, just if you can't control the weeds with no-till, then why do it? I can control the weeds almost 100% with tilling and cultivating. And I think that's the way I'm going to plant a lot of my corn and soybeans next year. So, well, I'm interested to see what's going to be the difference here. The no-till buckwheat versus the tilled brassica planting. We got a ton of rain right after I planted it, so yeah, right here's some seeds coming up. And on this looser ground, these brassicas should take root faster and be bigger after the first month of growth than they would be over here in a little bit more compacted ground.